Hello out there, everybody in Twitter and the rest of the internet. This is Ginger, and we are back for another episode of Fighting the Void. Now, as you see, my wonderful co-host, Crystal, is not here with us today. She is not feeling the best, so she's taking some time off, and then she's probably going to be doing some traveling, so we might not see her for a couple of weeks. Fair warning. But that's okay, just to help, class up the joint. I've got Paige Rogers with me today.
Hi.
Now, Paige, if you remember, going back a few episodes, she came here to talk about kind of the history of Israel and the history of the conflict of Israel with the, for lack of a better term, we'll say the Palestinians. And we went through that in depth. And at that time, and still, she has been writing for a website called The Knock Report, which, full disclosure, I've also started writing for a little bit. And
I'm so excited.
It's very cool. I enjoy it a lot. Now, Paige has just dropped a pretty significant report on Pastor John MacArthur. For those who may not be familiar, I came to know who Pastor MacArthur was when he was on the Ben Shapiro Sunday Special a few weeks ago. Before that, I hadn't heard of him. But I've come to understand that he is a major figure in the evangelical world. And, well, Paige, why don't you take it from there? Who is this guy, and what is it that you found out about him? What is your... lay it out for us here.
Well, he's a very well-known pastor in the evangelical world, specifically the Calvinist world, but his influence extends far beyond that. He has ministries throughout the world. He has a radio ministry, Grace to You, and a lot of people, even if they're not Calvinists, will look to John MacArthur as kind of a measuring stick, a ruler for what is godly, what is scriptural, if I'm making sense.
Yes.
And so he's a pretty important guy. A lot of ministers, like I said, use him as kind of a measuring stick. You'll come across articles where they will say, even John MacArthur thinks. So his name is often invoked to support someone's argument. And so basically...
You might say he's looked at as something of interpretive authority by many.
Yes. Okay. Yes, that's correct. And so basically I just finished doing a investigation and dropped it for Black History Month about basically Mr. MacArthur has been communicating his version of events regarding the night that Martin Luther King was assassinated. And he has placed himself with two civil rights icons from here in the South, just not far from me. And but one of those men has objected to the story, indicating that he's not telling the truth about him being there and the events as they relate to them together. Okay.
Yes. So what is this? What is the story that that Pastor MacArthur tells? As far as what he heard, what he did, what he saw, and then what's and then of course what's the objection?
I tell you what. Let me read you the 2009 quote. I feel like that's the most descriptive of his quotes. He's told the story several times. And in 2009, this was during a retrospective on 40 years, John MacArthur with Rick Holland.
Okay.
And this is the most detailed account he's given, so I'll just go ahead and use this one.
Go right ahead.
So he says, well, it was during those times that I was there speaking about being, sorry, let me back up. He starts off the account about spending time in Jackson, Mississippi with a longtime family friend, Dr. John Perkins. Dr. John Perkins is also a civil rights icon, especially here in the South.
Mm-hmm.
And so he starts off talking about his time in Mississippi with Dr. Perkins.
Okay.
Because he, on several occasions, came down and stayed with Dr. Perkins and helped him to go preach the gospel in the rural schools in the areas around Jackson, mm-hmm. especially Mendenhall. So that's where we begin.
Okay.
Well, it was during those times, and this is back, he's talking about back in the 60s.
Right.
And I was there, and I will never forget, I can't tell you the whole story, but I'll never forget one night. I was in the middle of Jackson, Mississippi, in the office of a man named Charles Evers. Charles Evers had a brother named Medgar Evers. Mm-hmm. Medgar Evers was the first martyr of the civil rights movement. He was the first person killed. Charles became the first black mayor in the South at Fayetteville, Mississippi. And it actually was Fayette. He was a friend of John, speaking of John Perkins, mm-hmm. and I had come to know him. And we were sitting there, and he was trying to explain to me, sitting there meaning in Charles Evers' NAACP office. He was sitting there, and he was trying to explain to me that night in Jackson what was going on. Now remember, I was a very young guy. I had become immersed in that culture. We'd love those people. And Charles was talking, and a man burst through the door and said, "Martin Luther King has been assassinated." That happened that night while I was with Charles and John and some others. The immediate issue was that there were serious things going on in the street in Jackson, and they were trying to get me out of there because I was as pale as a ghost. Yes. And here we were, worried about what might happen to me. And so they escorted me. And then they said, we're going to go to Jackson. We're going to go to Memphis. We want to see what happened.
Now let me just stop you right there. Right away, the story rings a little false. Because his contention is that they were basically escorting MacArthur out. They were going to escort him out of Jackson because of the high African-American population there. And they were worried, presumably, that there would be some sort of reaction to, Reverend King's assassination. Mm-hmm. And he might get targeted because he's, the white guy. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the solution to this conundrum is to drive to Memphis, where Martin Luther King was assassinated.
I know.
That's what they thought was a good, according to this story, that's what they thought was a good idea. Just right away, the flag's going up.
I know. Let's take him into the lion's den.
Exactly. I know where you'll be safe. No, the eye of the storm. No one will look for you there.
Yes, I know. I kind of had that same reaction. And several people here that I read the quotes to were like, what? That would be such a bad idea.
So little sense. But of course, he doesn't stop there.
That's right. So then this last part, he says, so they took me, meaning took him to Memphis. And in those days, the police weren't nearly as protective. Forensics hadn't developed to what they had, and they didn't necessarily protect crime scenes. So we went to the motel up to the landing, saw the blood where Martin Luther King had been shot just hours before by James Earl Ray. I actually went to the little building opposite the motel, went up to the second floor, stood on the toilet and looked out the window where James Earl Ray had shot him. And I was there at that very, very, very crucial time. End quote.
Yeah. So again,
it slightly varies with detail a little bit, but it's pretty consistent story on the other roughly 4 occasions.
Yeah, I read through your article on the knockreport.com, and he tells pretty much the same story, with whatever the kind of minor variations one would expect from telling the same story but over time. However, one of the more important figures in that story says, that ain't so. In fact, I believe it's Mr. Evers who has the most strenuous objection.
That is correct. That is absolutely correct.
Yes.
He has been consistent about while his story varies some, there's one consistency that has always remained, and it is that when Martin Luther King was shot, he was driving in his car.
Yes.
From Jackson, Mississippi to Natchez, Mississippi.
Yep.
And he's written about it in his book, which was also co-authored by another person. He spoke about it in April of 2018 with the Mississippi Public Broadcasting for the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's death. And excuse me, one of my research partners and I reached out to him. He agreed to a recorded interview with each of us.
Yep.
My recording didn't work. We had to use the other one.
It's a good thing you had the backup then, because I understand you spoke with my phone, but then
my phone call came after the other one.
Okay.
So thankfully, we had that first recording.
Yeah, no kidding.
We wouldn't have his voice.
Yeah, and then it would have been like, well, did he really say that? And you would have had to deal with that nonsense. But fortunately,
I'm still dealing with that nonsense.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. And
the mind is very imaginative.
Yes. And so, as I understand, Mr. Evers, now, did I read correctly that he denies that he even knows MacArthur?
That's correct. Now he right away you'll hear in if you go to the article, you hear and you listen to the interview. You hear right away he says, "I may have met him. I've met thousands of people, but I don't know him."
Okay. Yeah.
So there's the distinction. He doesn't recognize him. He doesn't remember him, but acknowledges that he may have met him.
So it's entirely possible that somebody comes out with an old photo of them shaking hands at some point down the road.
Oh, yes, definitely.
But that's because Evers, being the first black mayor in the South, he probably shook a lot of hands.
That's correct. Now, he was not the mayor of Fayette at this time.
Not at the time.
He was actually what it essentially is the head of the Mississippi NAACP.
Right.
He was their field work guy.
Okay.
And so he was still very important.
Yeah.
But he had not run for mayor yet.
Right. Still shaking a lot of hands.
Yes. And so that's why in Mr. MacArthur's account, he says that he was in Charles Evers' NAACP office because he was the head of Mississippi NAACP at the time. Now, Charles Evers, we read him several quotes. So, and we to try to be specific, and if you listen to the recording, it's a little bit uncomfortable because you feel like the same questions are being asked over and over and over again. Yeah. And it's because we wanted to make sure.
Right. Exactly you're covering all your bases.
I mean, it comes. You can tell he gets frustrated. No, I was driving to Natchez. Why do they keep asking me this? But you have to do that. I mean, you just to be careful, just to make sure, just to be safe.
Yep.
So to the question of whether he learned about the death, the shooting of Dr. King, when he was in his NAACP office in Jackson, and whether or not there was a man who burst through the door and exclaimed that Martin Luther King has been assassinated, his answers when we asked him those questions several times were, "I know that didn't happen. I know when I heard about Martin, I was headed to Natchez in my car driving. And my secretary called me and told me Dr. King had been shot. And I said, what? That's at 1 minute and 54 seconds. Then another time he says, no, ain't nobody with me, period, no office. He again says, that's a lie, that's a lie.
Yeah. Right, that's a lie. That's a lie. And this from a guy who is acknowledged as one of the more significant figures in the civil rights movement back in the 60s.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Yes, that's correct. I mean, he was Medgar Evers' brother.
Right.
I mean, they were very involved in it. Very, very involved. Actually, it was Medgar who had that position in the NAACP.
Mm-hmm.
It was after his death that his brother took over. They kind of had a pact.
Yep.
To where the two brothers would do everything toe in toe.
And of course, Eggers is actually significant enough that he's actually got a means of communication in his car.
Yes, that's correct.
Not exactly a common thing.
Yes.
Not a common thing back then. We're talking like just barely out there sort of technology, I should think. I think it
was first out there in 1946.
Okay.
It was fairly common for
radio-based, I should think.
Yes, it was a big giant box, and if you listen to the interview, he says, it sits in the floor of the car.
Right. Yes.
So it was called a car phone, but it was a car radio phone.
Okay. I wanted to go into that because I could see. Yeah, I wanted to be clear about that because I could see somebody going, that story ain't true. They didn't have cell phones back then. Not a cell phone.
Yes.
Not a cell phone. Basically a shortwave radio in your car.
Exactly. That's what it was. And it was very common especially for the civil rights leaders, to have those. Very common. And it wasn't that uncommon for actually regular people to have them. It was kind of funny when the story came out. Several people, including a Washington Post journalist, had said, I remember such and such had one, or my aunt had one, or my mom had one, or
basically CB radio, actually, now that I think about it. Okay, so
big old hunk. Big old thing.
Right. So and also the MacArthur's claims about the forensics. This is bunk as well, from what I understand from reading your article, and also just applying a little bit of common sense. They weren't complete rubes back in the 60s. And in fact, if I remember, because I listened to your interview on Hagman and Hagman, and I believe it was brought up during that time that the FBI actually took out the window frame that the person shot through. Actually pulled all of that just in case there was a fingerprint on it.
Not only that, but they took soil samples.
Right.
And hair samples. And you can still find all of the photos of the footprints they cast, the soil samples they took. Right. There was a white Mustang that they found. They were taking scrapings from that. And if you go to our county, not the clerk. What are they called?
I'm sure it varies, but clerk will work, records keeper.
Yes, I'm gonna have a blank. I'll remember in a minute, and I'll think of it. But if you go to registrar. Okay. So if you go to that website, several years ago, the registrar decided that he would like to make a lot of MLK findings about the investigation and so forth available to the public. And so there's an entire gallery, and you can go and actually see those things. You've still got samples from the hotel room.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Not everything's on there. You'd have to actually go down there and to read through all of the actual police communications.
Okay.
And so forth, but you can see photographs of the crime scene. You can see fingerprints of everyone there. Right. Including palm prints. You can see James Earl Ray's fingerprints from either Missouri or Minnesota. I apologize. Okay. I'm forgetting that right now. Yeah, but they had to get those to identify his prints. You can see photos of the windowsill where they took that out. So it was really, the police report is on there. The FBI report is on there. The DA report is on there. Also, and this is really interesting, and I did not put this in the article. It was one of those things I wished I had. There's just too much to include.
Right.
No one wants to read a dissertation.
Right. Yeah. There's only so much space.
Yes. But on the website, you can also listen to the dispatch, the live police dispatch.
Oh, wow.
It's very moving. It takes you by surprise a little bit.
Gotcha.
I kind of want to cry when I think about it. Because it's just real time, and you hear them. They're saying, "We got a shot." A few seconds later, it's confirmed the Reverend King has been shot. You hear the dispatcher saying, "Form a ring around the Lorraine Hotel." Few seconds. I mean, it's just lickety split. They're saying,
if I recall from the article, they were
from the brick building, shut it off. A few seconds later, they're saying seal off the whole area, and you just hear all of the communication. It's just very intense. It's very moving.
And if I recall correctly from the article, the whole area was sealed off within 10 minutes.
10 minutes, yes.
Which is, much faster, which is way too fast to allow Pastor MacArthur to drive all the way up from Jackson after he found out and go for a little stroll through the crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
And
now the police left and like it says in the article, the police left the balcony at 11 p.m. They had finished processing it.
Yes.
That is the site where where King was struck.
Mm-hmm.
They have to focus on finding the shooter.
Right.
They had that building and that area locked down. It was under guard.
Now, while they might have been finished processing at 11 p.m., that area was still guarded for quite some time afterwards. Correct?
Yes, they let all of the people who were staying at the hotel were allowed to return because they were staying there.
Yeah. Beyond that, the room itself was actually still protected for some time thereafter, was it not?
No, they let everyone back in. They finished it at 11 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah, because that was the recipient site of the shooting. Just like when JFK was shot.
Okay.
That was the street.
Okay.
They were focusing on that building.
Yes.
Where the shot came from.
Okay. Yep.
There's only
that makes sense.
Yes. So once they finished processing and looking for the projectile, which then they found out was in Dr. King, especially once they found that projectile and it was still in Dr. King's body, and finished processing that scene, then they released it back to the people to go into their room.
Okay.
And to be cleaned.
Right. Okay, now I'm curious.
They returned the next day and continued, and that lasted. They had surveyors out where they measured the angle just to even find out if the shot could be fired from the window.
Right.
The photographers were back out the next morning.
Yep.
Continuing to photograph the entire area. So it was pretty intense investigation.
Yeah. That definitely not the loosey-goosey thing that Pastor MacArthur describes. That's for sure.
No, and especially with that bathroom, it was locked down. It was locked down. It was under tight guard.
Now I am curious. What is it that prompted you to start peeling back this particular onion?
Well, I think it was October.
Okay.
I had published an article about a pastor, John Longacre, from Vermont.
Okay.
Who, before he was a pastor, he worked at a Christian school and had molested one of his students for a number of years.
Ugh.
Was convicted of it, confessed to it,
right?
And it's pretty gruesome. I mean, the details are pretty graphic.
It's the kind of and, not for the kids. Yeah.
And I had obtained the court records and so forth with his confession. After that, he served time in prison, he was released and then came to be a pastor at this church in Vermont.
Okay.
Now, in 2016, that church went on to advocate for the sex offender record of a violent pedophile. I mean, violent pedophile.
A different person, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
The church members went to the courthouse and advocated for this sex offender, who was one of their members, to be removed from the sex offender list. In Vermont, they don't remove people from the sex offender list, so thank God it didn't happen.
Right, right.
But he was the pastor of the church at that time, now advocating for a violent pedophile
or another
sex offender list. So I had to obtain the court documents and so forth and publish those in the article, and I had attempted to reach out to the elders and so forth. And it was after that piece published, a reader reached out to me and said, what if you liked the person, or what if this person was a big name? Would you still report on it? And I said, well, if I investigate it and I come to the conclusion that I believe it's true, then yes, it doesn't matter who it is. So then they told me that they had realized that there was an inconsistency in Dr. Evers' account and Dr. MacArthur's account.
Oh, okay. Okay, so if somebody who read that was like, "Oh, you're willing to kind of go after people if need be," and so they relayed that there was a discrepancy here, and you kind of went after it from there.
I think they were looking for someone willing to actually look into it because of the subject. Now,
I'm curious: was there some other? Was there a connection between MacArthur and this congregation that you're talking about?
No. No. They were totally separate.
Okay. So it was just a matter of that clearly you're willing to do the hard work necessary to, to expose somebody who's full of crap.
Well, and a lot of people aren't going to want to look into people who are very popular.
Correct.
Or a big name. I had just signed Pastor MacArthur's statement on social justice and the gospel, and so I was very skeptical at first, and I really didn't want to believe it.
Right.
Okay, no, and I said I would look into it, and so then it just led to a lot of hard work and crying and praying and crying and praying and crying and praying.
Right. Now, as it turns out, these two strands of your investigation actually do connect through another way. Pastor MacArthur does seem to unfortunately have some connection with other sex offenders, if I understand correctly.
That's correct. You're speaking about David Gray.
Yes.
And he was a church member. He also taught at Pastor MacArthur's church used to have a school. And he taught at that school. He later taught in the LA public schools. And he was arrested for brutalizing his adopted children. I mean, especially his oldest daughter. And she was itty bitty. I mean, he brutalized her. And for sexually abusing his children. It's
his own kids. Now,
they were adopted, but yes, his own children.
Okay, yeah, adopted. Wow.
That's correct. There are screenshots of a supposed newsletter from. Now, David Gray was convicted.
Right.
He's in prison.
Still in prison currently.
And so I'm sorry.
Still in prison currently.
That's correct.
Okay.
There are screenshots of what is purported to be a newsletter.
Okay.
Written by David Gray going around Twitter.
Okay. Yep.
With a purported quote from Pastor MacArthur, endorsing and praising David Gray for being a minister in prison, for having a prison ministry. I did, in a thread that was going back and forth, and a lot of people were involved. This was about a month ago or a month and a half ago. I did reach out to Phil Johnson, who is the executive director of Grace to You, which is Pastor MacArthur's radio ministry. I did respond immediately to him and ask him for comment, and if he could confirm that Pastor MacArthur had even endorsed David Gray, or if that newsletter was legit. I can't remember how I phrased the question, but I asked him for comment, but I did not receive a reply. Okay, so I don't know if that is actually legitimate or not, but we do know that David Gray went to his church, and unfortunately, his wife, when she was rebuffed by, reportedly, according to court documents, rebuffed by the church when she wanted to seek worldly counseling for herself and her children. She was eventually excommunicated.
Okay, now I'm kind of curious, just as a matter of theological curiosity, how does that work in this particular branch of Protestantism? Where is that something that like MacArthur would have had to sign off on, like saying you don't come here no more? How does that?
I have absolutely no idea. I'm not a Calvinist. I'm not an evangelical or American evangelical. My faith is evangelical, but it's not American evangelical.
Right.
So I don't know. It's kind of a different world. So I honestly have no idea. I couldn't answer.
So it could at the very least it had to come from high up within that particular church, where they say you're not welcome here no more.
Or either that, or it may be more like a shunning to where you are, where everybody ignores you, and you're told to leave, and then no one talks to you anymore. Right. Kind of. So I would expect it to be less formal and more like, but I don't know. I honestly don't.
No, that's fair. The bottom line is she was essentially booted because she was like, yeah, my husband is abusing our adopted children, and I'd really like that to stop. The bottom.
She had hoped to, go to marriage counseling and so forth, and this is all according to the court documents.
Okay.
However, the counseling outside of the church was frowned upon, and she eventually decided to separate. And I believe that's when she was shunned. Okay.
Now, Pastor MacArthur aside, because you said you couldn't get you haven't been able to verify the veracity of the newsletter, or at least
that's
of the
correct.
Quote. Although it's interesting to me that you reached out to somebody who should at least be able to find out, and no comment at all. Not even a no comment. no response whatsoever. Yeah, does that necessarily mean it's legit? No, but it's interesting. It's very interesting. Now,
it's disappointing. It is.
It is.
You really want to hear, no, it didn't happen.
Yeah, well, one would certainly hope that if it's not true, and someone would be like absolutely jumping right on that horse, saying, "No, this is a dirty lie. It's not remotely true." Pastor MacArthur completely disavows this dude, and everything, and all of that. One would hope,
or at least say, "I'll ask, and then I'll get back with you."
Right, and then.
At least feign effort.
Yeah. Gosh, at least you suck at this. Yeah. Why do you suck at this so bad? Then at least when you call out, you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I just got buried under so many things." You can always do that.
Or I haven't heard back yet.
Right? Yes, I'm sorry. I'm waiting on a response from my secretary called his secretary, and they just haven't been able to connect. Gosh, people, this is easy if you think about it. But anyway, this is beside the point. The point is, though, and this gets into our other significant topic. Again, another thing you've been working hard on is talking about sex abuse in the in the Protestant world, in different Protestant churches. I've talked a lot about the various abuse scandals going on in the Catholic Church. I did like a whole series of episodes on it just very recently, and anyone is welcome to go back and watch all of those. And I plan on revisiting it within the next couple of weeks after the bishops have their big meeting in Rome next week, and talking about whatever it is they figure out as what's supposed to be a solution. We'll see. It'll be fun. But in the meantime, you've done a lot of hard work reminding us all that this isn't a uniquely Catholic problem. A fact that has once again has been underlined just within the last week with some revelations from the Southern Baptist Convention. So what is it you're finding as you start delving into, shall we say, I don't know what to say, the wagon circling, I guess just the fact that Protestants have these same sort of problems as Catholics, and let's be honest, let's be fair, pick any demographic, pick any group, we have this, but let's deal with the uniquely Protestant aspects of this.
Well, and the work really for this has to go to, and while I'm thinking about it, let me go ahead and look up their names.
Please.
They deserve a big shout out. So the authors, this is at the Houston Chronicle. They've done an awesome job. They're the ones who really broke this open. I mean, this is huge.
And this is on the Southern Baptist Convention, the recent
that's
story.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it's Lisa, I believe, Lisa Olson, Robert Downen, John Tedesco, and then Multimedia by John Shakely. So they have basically done this months and months of investigation, looking through news reports, and found that the Southern Baptist Convention has a big problem, basically.
Okay.
A lot of Protestants like to think that we don't have the problems of the Catholic Church. We're not the Catholics. We don't have their problems.
Because your pastors can be married.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons. Of
course, yes.
Well, but it's because of the celibacy, or it's only because of homosexuality, or this and that. And what it's becoming a pattern of these revelations, because I mean this is, it's almost like in waves. It goes in waves. It's like 2002, 2007, 2019, these different waves. And Protestants have just as much of a problem as Catholics. There's a study, and I can't remember the website. It's in Pennsylvania. I'll have to send it to you. Penn Live. That's what it is.
Penn Live, okay.
Penn Live had released some information in 2018 after all of the Catholic set, the new Catholic sex. I
thought it was interesting that you went to Pennsylvania, because that's where the recent Catholic scandal got jump started again, when the grand jury report from Pittsburgh came out. Exactly.
And so basically from the 1950s to that year, roughly 10,000 priests had been named, had been implicated. So it was roughly about 228 per year. Now, also interesting is that there was a study done by the AP, actually digging. And they had reached out to 3 different insurance companies who insure
follow the money
Protestant churches for liability, especially sex abuse. And so it averaged where it was 260 reports a year. So 260 reports is over 228 reports of the Catholic Church. That doesn't mean that they were all credible.
Right. That's one of the things I wanted to ask is the reports. Now, these are reports that make their way to the insurance company. Essentially, these aren't just.
Say it again.
I'm sorry, were these reports made to police or reports that they learned from
the insurance company?
The insurance company. Okay,
these
so
reports to the insurance companies.
That right, if it's a report that's going to the insurance companies, it may or may not be credible legally, but clearly, I would say whatever churches are being insured by them, they're at least concerned enough to pick up the phone and call Jim at State Farm.
Exactly, they're concerned enough to make the phone call.
Yeah.
Now, the Houston Chronicle, they went and dug through all kinds of media records, reports, so forth. They have the methodology listed and explained very well in that first article.
Mm-hmm.
And they went from 98 to 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 380 over that span that they found in media reports. And in the Protestant, in the Baptist Church.
The Southern Baptist Convention, yes.
Yes, the Southern Baptist Convention. Thank you. That's that not all Baptists are the same. Thank you for clarifying. And so what they compiled only included credible allegations where convictions occurred or someone was successfully sued.
Okay.
So that was 380, and that's just the Southern Baptist Convention. And then there were approximately 700 victims.
That's not a necessarily small number, unfortunately. And
most people, they don't report.
Right. Now, and you've in your own reporting, you found this in other congregations and denominations in various areas of the country, correct?
That is correct. For example, and this goes up to Canada, but roughly 4%, this was another study, roughly 4% of either church volunteers or priests, so forth, lay ministers, so on and so forth, in the Anglican Church in Western Canada were predators, essentially.
4%.
4%.
Okay.
In the public schools in America, it's 5 to 7%.
Yeah. I remember reading back, back during Catholic Abuse Scandal 1.0, back in the early 2000s. I remember reading that Congress had commissioned a study to look into what kind of problems they might be looking at in the public schools, and when the initial results were coming in that it's probably 100 times worse than the Catholic Church is dealing with, they're like, I think we're done funding your study. I don't think I want to know anymore. Thank you very much. And it's also telling that at least in some places, such as Colorado, when they were talking about prosecuting abusive priests and everything, and for understandable reasons, we're looking at doing away with statute of limitations for such cases. They specifically exempted public institutions. Specifically exempted. They're like you can sue the hell out of them, but you don't get to come at us at all.
Yes, it is completely absurd. When I was in college, earning my degree in early childhood development, so in the human development and education field, I can remember a professor saying, we were having a discussion about tenure, and I remember her saying that you would basically have to be selling cocaine in the middle of class while having sex on the floor with a student in front of the entire class during the school day in order to get fired. I will never forget that, because I just thought, what?
Okay. Well, and the fun thing is, I'm pretty sure I read that that's an elective course at Mizzou University now.
Yeah.
At this point, it wouldn't surprise me if that did happen as part of a class experiment.
And unfortunately, in Tennessee, we have found recently that teachers who are accused are It is just like what is happening, what you read about in the Houston Chronicle.
Okay.
Where ministers are leaving and they're floating and they're going around the country.
Yes.
It is the same thing we're finding in Tennessee with teachers. Is that they leave a school system and they're able to go into a different school system, into a different county.
Sounds familiar.
They just move. They're just fluid. They just move throughout. So you end up accumulating these victims.
Now I'm curious. Now are a lot of these, and I kind of want to focus specifically on because we can follow this in any number of different directions. I kind of want to focus specifically on what's going on with the Protestant churches. Are these are the cases of abuse recent? Are we are we getting large numbers of people being abused just within the last couple of years, or is it like we're kind of used to where it's okay, yes, it was happening a lot, but back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, when you can at least partially attribute it to cultural forces, for lack of a better term. What are we looking at here? We're looking at old cases that are just coming to light, or newer cases?
I don't know. I mean, the SBC, pardon me, the Houston Chronicle looked into just from 1998 until now.
Okay, so that's
so we don't really have that long-term data.
Okay.
With the Catholic Church, we know that it peaked in the 70s, and then it tapered off very quickly in the 80s.
Right. Unfortunately, it's still going on to varying degrees, but yeah, the numbers, at least as far as we know, are well down. Although I'm going to go ahead and play devil's advocate against my own team here a moment, and say that some have pointed out that, well, a lot of times these cases take some time to come out. So we may not know what's going on right now until 10 years down the road, when maybe more people do come forward, which is, I honestly, I think that's a valid point. So maybe it's possible that 10, 20 years from now, we find out the numbers haven't dropped as much as we think.
What I found the most
just to be fully fair and everything to my own side, or I don't know, fair is the right word. Critical, I should say.
What I found most disturbing with this recent, these recent revelations in terms of the SBC, and the Presbyterian Church has suffered this. I mean, this is not just the SBC. We can't. I mean, this is a symptom of a big problem.
Yes,
that is affecting every church.
Yeah, I mean, we were going to talk about this. We've been planning on talking about this for weeks, long before this SBC story came out. This was just entirely oh, I guess we're going to bring that up too.
That's right. And now what I found was the most disturbing, though, is that if a Catholic priest was credibly charged and he went to prison, I haven't found an instance of him returning to the priesthood.
As far as I know, no.
And whereas with the Southern Baptists, they're coming out of prison and going back to work in the church.
Coming out of prison and going back to work. Are you kidding me?
No. And some churches are hiring these individuals knowing that they went to jail for sexual predation.
Wow. Okay, I have so many issues with this. so many issues with this.
Yes.
This would honestly, for me to really, for us to really dig into this page, we would need to break out our Bibles, our commentaries, and everything, and let's pick this apart. Why? What is the mentality that leads to that? Anyone thinking that's a good idea? Now, I can understand back in the 60s and 70s when the shrinks were like, "Don't worry, this is a problem. This is totally a psychological problem. We can totally fix this." And I can totally see a lot of pastors, just like a lot of bishops, were like, "Yeah, sure, fix them, please, go do that thing." And then the shrinks say, "Fixed. Okay, great. But we obviously, it's going to be weird if we put you back in the same parish, or or congregation. So we're going to put you over here instead, just so you get a fresh start, no baggage and everything. And they think everything's fine. I can understand. I can understand. Still not a good call, but there's some hindsight at play there. Now, but if you've got somebody who's convicted and has gone to prison and done prison time, are you kidding me? You got a friend who's gone through AA and he completes the program, and you go and celebrate by going to the bar. It's like, no, you don't do that.
Yep. I know. And I think it has a lot to do with a very distorted, contorted, perverted, just mutilated beyond recognition kind of sense of forgiveness. Yeah. To where instead of going on what Christ tells us about forgiveness, we go on guilt about having to love and be fluffy and everything's wonderful, and we just have to love and forgive and pretend like nothing's happened. That is not biblical.
No.
You're not supposed to let predators, unrepentant, and some of these people are unrepentant. They play the victim or so on and so forth. Right. You don't let them back into positions of leadership. You don't let them. Some of these people are back in youth group. And a time and time again, I'm hearing, well, we are supposed to forgive and pray. Okay.
That's one thing.
That doesn't mean ignore what happened.
Exactly. It doesn't mean you say,
apologize to you for raping a 2-year-old, for raping a 3-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like
or for trying to come on to your husband.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you can forgive.
No, don't be stupid. It's just amazing.
Yeah. It's like, forgiving is one thing, and then going, but why don't you, so we forgive you. Why don't you take charge of the daycare? No.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. You don't.
Yes. We are supposed to be wise as serpents.
Yes. Yes.
And innocent as doves. Innocent as doves and wise as serpents. Wise as serpents means we're not supposed to go and be fooled like that. Yeah. Innocent as doves means we're not supposed to be complicit in sin. What these people are doing, and they don't realize it, but they are breaking both of those. They are not innocent as doves, and they are not wise as serpents.
No, yeah, it's that blows my mind. That you've got at risk of repeating myself, that you got people from prison getting taken to youth groups. Are you freaking kidding me? Don't, for crying out loud. Don't, for one, a person shouldn't go where he's tempted. And two, when you know someone's obviously tempted, you don't put him in that position.
Right.
It's like, you clearly have an issue with this, but I think the Spirit is testing you. So we want to provide you that opportunity. No.
That's not even a nice thing to do to people anyway.
No. It's literally,
I love you, so I will tempt you.
Say you've got, let's go ahead. Let's play this on the most positive possible way. You've got a guy that is genuinely repentant. He genuinely does want to change his life, and he still wants to serve. He wants to serve God. He wants to be contributing to his congregation. Great, awesome, dude. You don't put that guy back in exactly the same situation that got him in prison in the first place. Clearly, he's got, you know what? Can Christ go ahead and completely transform a person? Sure, yeah. But if you think that for sure, whether or not anyone has, well, you clearly have got a more direct line to God than I do.
Right?
It's like, no, you don't put a person in that position, because now you've got an area where they're legitimately tempted, and you're saying, it's like, well, good luck resisting those urges.
Right. Now, here's an example from part 2 of the Chronicles series, because it's a 3-part series.
Yes.
This is a man named Daryl, and I apologize, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce his last name. I don't know anybody that has it. But Gilliard or Gilliard?
Sure.
So, number 1, he was at Victory Baptist Church, once a rising star in the SBC, Gilliard was accused by scores of women of misconduct ranging from sexual harassment to rape. The allegations followed him as he moved from church to church in the 1980s and 90s. Next up, same guy, Shiloh Metropolitan Baptist Church. In 2009, Gilliard pleaded to lewd conduct and molestation involving 2 minors and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Same dude, here we go again. Now we're at Christ Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
Despite Gilliard's track record, another church hired him after his release from prison in 2011. Church leaders made national headlines when they barred children from attending worship services because he wasn't allowed to be with them. Can we say violate the call to bring the children to you?
Wait a minute, hold on. So they got this guy leading the service. So it's like they were thinking about what we were just talking about. Well, we shouldn't put him in a position where he's going to be tempted. So no kids in the church.
Yeah, and Jesus says to bring the children.
That's the wrong answer. It's the wrong answer.
Yes, don't have a God that can't have kids in the sanctuary.
Yeah. I'm just going to go ahead and say that if the court's saying, you know, that guy, he's not allowed to be within like 100 yards of anyone under 15. Maybe the right answer is to not have him up at the pulpit. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Another person left after an elder questioned his, and I think he was either a pastor or over the youth group. An elder questioned his rules for swimming, which was that all the children had to swim nude.
What?
Mm-hmm. What? And he got another job after that. Another job.
Huh? I got nothing. I don't have I have nothing. There's no response to that. Moving on. So we're talking about some of the crazier reactions or lack thereof to this by some of the various congregations here in the States. Is there anyone who's handling this better? Is it who's at least trying? Is there anyone out there that you found that at least said, "Oh my gosh, we've got a problem here," and is like, we need to address this. We need to come up with some sort of reporting, some sort of training. Which, having been through the "Hey, don't abuse kids" training in the Catholic world, it's annoying. It's stupid. It's like saying, "Look, we're doing something," because we're telling people don't abuse kids. Well, no kidding. If you need to be told, you probably shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. But and admittedly, catching that is hard. I don't care who you are. But anyway, who's at least trying?
There are either individual congregations
mm-hmm.
or some denominations who are more actively trying to address it.
Okay.
I don't have that information, so I don't want to say something erroneous.
Okay.
But some are trying to take it a bit more serious than others. Some just want to have more conferences about it or assign more committees. But I've seen the most improvement on a congregational level.
Uh-huh.
So I think it has a lot, the local church has a lot to do with it. It's like a make or break. Either you're a hindrance or you're trying to address something for real and not just giving lip service.
All right. And I do want to say one thing with the training that we get with Catholic ministries and everything. It is one thing that it does do that is good is it reminds you that don't even create the perception that there's the possibility that something could be going on.
Mm-hmm.
You're never alone. You're never alone behind a closed door mm-hmm. with a kid. It's certainly not by yourself. You're never, mm-hmm. and just things like that. Don't if you're a hugger, don't be.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think. I'm sorry.
Just that sort of thing. Helpful reminders like don't even allow the perception to exist, which is a good reminder. Absolutely. And I think for someone who goes in with that in mind, you probably are helping some people not even get into it. So someone who could possibly have an inclination, it's harder for that to develop if you're consciously trying to avoid those situations. If what I'm saying makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I'm on board with you. I'm following you. And I believe now from news reports, I haven't heard from any victims in the Presbyterian Church. So I'm just going on news reports. I believe that because it was several years ago, maybe a decade ago, that they had a kind of a big issue. And I know that they instituted some guidelines that was for the entire church and what not to do, and having more than one adult present at all times. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I know that they have made a big effort to try to prevent that from reoccurring.
Right. So it's not that everyone is ignoring this. It's not that everyone is an idiot. Some people are at least trying to go, hey, we've got to do something concrete about this issue. And that's good. Now, in terms of what does this abuse looks like? Have you found that it's mostly boys? Is it mostly girls? A mix of the two? Is there an age group that's more affected than another?
With the Catholic Church, it appears to be more adolescents.
Yes. Mostly adolescent boys.
Mm-hmm. And with this, with Protestants, though, it doesn't break down quite as easily on those lines.
Okay.
But it tends to be more from what I've read, and I'm not the authority on this. Mm-hmm. So know that this is just what I've read, and I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. But it appears that it's more teenage girls.
Okay.
However, it includes adults, adult men, adult women.
Being abused or as the abusers?
As the victims. Even adults are being victimized.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it's little children. It's just across the board. It's just awful.
Yeah.
I've known of people to write inappropriate literature to adult women, fantasies, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. That's not good either. Not good at all.
No.
So along the same lines, is this like cropping up more in one area than another? Is it like, from what we can tell, is it worse like in big cities or rural area? And is there any like profile with the perpetrators? Is it usually like the pastor, or is it usually a youth group leader, or is there no clear breakdown yet? We're still kind of, it seems like the issues within the Protestant world haven't gotten nearly the media attention that the Catholic world does. So maybe a lot of these studies haven't even been done yet.
Yes. I think we actually really need some studies on this, actually. Yeah. There are several, but the ones I found are a few years old.
Okay.
I don't know of any area, like as far as geography.
Okay.
Though I do know that the missionary field appears to be the worst.
Really? Well, I guess that far from home, yeah.
Focus, they join that missionary field.
Okay. Now, are we talking foreign missions, or like missions within the states?
Both.
Both. Okay. And is it like missions where like they go and they live within a given community for years on end, or are we talking about the sort of situation where they take the youth group down to, New Orleans to gut houses after Katrina, sort of thing?
Where you would go and live.
Okay, so that's more
both,
prevalent
but
there.
But the worst is in the actual missionary field where you are seeing it. You would go to Africa, and it's not even that. Not only are children abused in the community that you're supposedly trying to help, but children of other missionaries who are there with you are victims. So so the predators are victimizing their friends, their fellow missionaries' children, or their fellow missionaries' wife.
Yeah, that's fun.
I'm thinking about this previous question where you asked if there was kind of a particular like victim category. I would say a lot of the victims are vulnerable in some way.
Okay.
Whether
that seems normal.
Yes,
in
it's
a
the
sense.
same with other predators outside the church. If it's a little boy that doesn't have a dad, that's kind of a prime target.
Okay, yeah, I can see that, and that seems to be
a
common across victims of abuse, no matter where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So how is the Protestant media world taking this whole thing? Because I mean, there's secular media. We Catholics, we kind of have our own media circles, and what's going on with Protestant media land as far as this goes?
I haven't really seen a lot of stuff about it. Now, I don't know if it's because the Chronicles report is so thorough and so everyone's going straight to the source.
Okay. Do you think this Houston Chronicle report, do you think this has the potential to sort of be your Boston Globe?
Yes, it was so good. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Well, honestly, I hope it is, because I hope that the Protestant world gets its act together on this and starts really seriously addressing it. Do the studies like we did with, like the John Jay report that the Catholic world did, and just really get into this, figure out what's really going on, figure out who the perpetrators are, how to deal with them, how to prevent them from showing up in the first place, and start doing a little more self-policing, self-reporting, and for crying out loud, stop shuffling these people around. And also realize that forgiveness and even grace, it's not magic. It doesn't just, not normally, not everybody is St. Paul. Okay. Not everybody's going to get the Damascus treatment. And even then, he said many times that he had his own issues, his own thorns in the side that he had to deal with. So
that's right.
Now, you have gotten, well, it's been a couple of weeks since you dropped the MacArthur report now. In fact, we were going to be doing this a couple of weeks ago, but you had some other stuff going on as a result of that report. So, and I'm actually glad that it worked out this way, because we get to talk about what's happened since then. You actually got some good traction from that. We already mentioned that you were on Hagman and Hagman. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You were on that show, did a good interview on that, and you got a retweet from the Washington Post, if I remember right, and also some traction from Relevant Magazine. What else has gone on, positive and negative? Feel free to share.
There's been a lot of positive.
Okay.
Like a lot. It's been such a godsend to me. And there's also been a lot of negative.
You've mentioned,
I've been accused of I'm evil. And
clearly. Clearly.
I have somehow joined a cabal with Charles Evers and Donald Trump to build the border wall, and somehow in the scheme of things, that in order to get the border wall built, we have to criticize John MacArthur.
I'm not seeing it.
I've been accused of manufacturing the entire thing. I've had multiple Calvinist websites accredit my article not to me, but to someone who didn't even write it. Did not even write it. I've had my work stripped from my name, my months of labor, my months of toil.
Oh, God, that would piss me off more than a little.
Yes. And basically it's all, I'm part of this plot to attack this godly ministry, and I've lied. I don't know. It's been pretty bad. But in the midst of that,
yes,
there has been tremendous support. And most of all, though, from my God, my Savior, and he's just given me such peace in everything. And I'm just so thankful. I know this is a difficult thing to write. It wasn't a happy thing for me to do.
Right.
I spent a lot of time crying, like I said, crying and praying. But I just have such peace. I know that he's using me somehow. I don't know how. I don't know why. I don't know what. I don't know yet.
Well, let me just go ahead and take a stab at least. And we were talking about this right before we went live, that you're kind of exposing, playing a role in the exposing of the cults of personality that build up around these guys, that build up around these massive media personality pastors. And that's not always a great thing. At the very least, even if they start out good, that kind of attention, that kind of adulation can certainly, it starts playing on the pride, which I gotta think it's gotta be the most dangerous thing for a successful pastor or priest, dealing with pride. It's gotta be one of the hardest struggles that they've got. But definitely. Even and that's for somebody who starts out well, who starts race on the right foot. Now you get some of these other guys who maybe they don't start the race so well. So, and I guess, what do you think? Why this cult of personality? Why is it that some of these guys, they achieve this level of notoriety that people who go to their churches, buy their books, listen to the radio shows, whatever. Why? What is it? Why do they do this circling the wagons number? Why can't they handle this especially when it looks like very credible accusations and criticism against Pastor, whether it's Pastor MacArthur or someone else?
I don't know.
They just, it seems like this. Honestly, they're circling the wagons the same way that I see fans of whatever politician circle the wagons whenever they're accused of something, caught in a lie or whatever. It's like, no, it wasn't them.
Yeah, it's actually very similar to that. It's a good observation. I don't know. I do know that, the world is a crazy place.
Yes.
And sometimes Christians, including myself especially, feel frustrated and looking for a steadiness, a guidepost, if you will. And I think some of these guys really offered that. That's what I really kind of thought about MacArthur before all of this. But I still wasn't. But I never, I never went over there, so I don't really understand that. It's not, in the in my denomination, there, you know, your priest isn't like popular. You know, he's not like he doesn't have a bunch of books, and
Right.
you don't know like his other churches don't know his name.
Right.
People in,
Yeah. And that's the case for most.
Australia don't know his name, and they don't
Right.
play his radio programs.
Right.
So it is so different for me. I don't know. Some of these guys aren't really a guidepost like MacArthur would be. I think, I don't know if people just really like what they say. It's something that has to do with, they're fulfilling some sort of need. I mean, it's just like the Kardashians. I don't get it.
That's awesome. They're ecclesial Kardashians. Oh gosh, I'm still going to use that when I'm talking about Joel Osteen someday.
Really, that's good.
Oh, that's awesome. But you know, and we've, you know, and again, Catholics certainly are not immune to that. Certainly not. We've got our own. Cult of personality can build up around a given priest or bishop or what have you. Although with us, I'd say it's more, at least based on the recent scandals and revelations, we have more of an issue with the Good Old Boy Network. But still, I think it'd be curious to know what happens if some of our more prominent media people wind up getting accusations brought against them. What would the response be? I'd be curious, and it would be interesting. Although I can say, but there was somebody a few years back, Father John Carapi, and he was huge in apologetic circles for a while. He was a convert, and he had this huge story about how he was like a Green Beret, and then when he got out, he made a lot of money doing something, I think business related, but he fell flat on his face because of drugs and this and that and the other thing, and then he found God and he became a priest, and which he did in fact become a priest, and again a very well known one, the kind that you would get, that you would pay to come and speak at your parish and all of that. And after a while, though, it sort of came out that this guy, he's got his own like private, like multi-million-dollar residence and stuff, and he seems to bring some lady friends there fairly frequently, and people started doing a little digging. It's like, oh, wait a minute, this guy's whole thing might be a fraud. And before you knew it, he was pretty much cast out, and all but a very small handful of people were pretty much everyone was suddenly paying no attention to this guy anymore. We're like, you're full of crap. You out of the circle. And that said, I would love to see the same treatment be given to others right now, because he wasn't accused of any sort of abuse per se. He was basically accused of basically violating his vow of celibacy, and of course fabricating his whole life story up to becoming a priest.
Oh my gosh! Well, I think it would be like akin to Cardinal Sarah.
Cardinal Sarah. Yeah,
I think it with MacArthur would be akin to like Cardinal Sarah having.
I'm okay. Sarah, help me out.
Africa.
Oh, I don't think I'm up on this.
Oh, really?
I'm gonna have to do some reading. It looks like.
Yes, he was. A lot of people were really hoping that he would be the Pope, the next Pope, when Francis was chosen. They were really hoping for Cardinal Sarah. He's very vocal, very devout, very. He's the perfect epitome of the African church right now. Both Anglican and Catholic, to where you have in the West and in the Northern Hemisphere, you have this great apostasy occurring, and in the South, I know in the Anglican Church, called the Global South, you have the African priests, the African bishops, and so forth, who are staunch and passionate and stubborn and divine. I mean, they're fantastic. And so are really just wonderful, doing wonderful works. And Cardinal Sarah is one of those in the Catholic Church. I think it would be kind of like akin to him.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have to look into this guy because.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to have to look into now that you describe it. It rings a little bit of a bell, but I'm nowhere near as knowledgeable about him as you are, apparently. So yeah, I have some catching up to do. Okay, so I think we're about ready to wrap this up here, Paige. And again, I want to thank you for doing the hard work. I think it's necessary work that we get this stuff out into the open so we can finally deal with it and squash it. And again, I don't care where it comes from, Protestant, Catholic, secular, whatever. We're fighting against human nature here, because human nature is screwed up and we are broken, and we can't fix this on our own. And I think we know where we're supposed to turn for that. Without honestly, as Christians, we both believe that without Christ, we're not fixing this. Try to fix it on our own. We can do some cosmetic stuff, but that's going to be about it. Human nature is pretty rough. And but again, you're doing good work in at least exposing it, and from here on out, it's up to others to kind of do the work of fixing it, and truly, really fixing it. And now, Paige, I'm hoping we can get you back in a couple of weeks, whenever we can make the schedule work, because as I mentioned earlier, the Pope and the bishops are having a big meeting in Rome to talk about the Catholic end of this, and there's going to be something to talk about. We'll see what they come up with. Honestly, I'm not overly optimistic, because I've been following the Catholic world for a bit, and some committee or somebody issues a document, and everybody just kind of goes, "Oh, that's nice."
Yep. I think we'll have a lot to talk about.
I think we will. I think there will at least be interesting things to talk about. So, Paige, why don't I give you the last word here as the guest? How do you want to wrap this up?
Oh, I don't know. Bye. I don't know. Fair enough. Put you on the spot.
Okay. Again, Paige writes top-notch investigative journalism for the Knock Report at knockreport.com. You can find her on Twitter at Paige T. Rogers. And Paige, is there anywhere else that people can find you at?
Just my website, which is thepaintingpastor.org.
Okay. And with that, next week, we've got another great guest coming up. You know her as Blindfold Bethany. She'll be here to talk about about her recent involvement in local politics. So we're up here. We're gonna take it back down to ground level here, and we're just gonna have a good conversation next week with Blindfold Bethany. So until then, you guys stay good and keep fighting the good fight.